Brielle Barnes had never felt more out of place than she did sitting alone at the bar of the Westmont Grand Hotel, swirling the last half-inch of overpriced Chardonnay in her glass, and pretending not to care that she was the only one without a +1. Her heels ached, her job interview had tanked, and the last of her savings had just covered her bus ride into the city. She wasn't supposed to be here surrounded by marble floors, gold-trimmed everything, and guests who looked like they'd stepped out of glossy magazines. But the hotel was warm, the bar was quiet, and for a few hours she could pretend. "Rough day?" a voice asked beside her. She turned, startled. The man who'd taken the seat next to her was dressed in a fitted navy suit, the kind that looked tailored and expensive without trying too hard. His dark brown hair was slightly tousled like he'd run a hand through it a few too many times, and his light stubble framed a jawline that was dangerously defined. "Is it that obvious?" she said with a dry laugh. "Only because I've had about the same one," he replied, signaling the bartender with a nod. "Whiskey neat." The bartender placed the drink in front of him almost instantly, like he already knew the order. She raised an eyebrow. "You come here often," the man gave a shrug. "More than I should, probably." "I'm guessing you're not here for the free peanuts," he chuckled. "Definitely not," she offered her hand. "I'm Brielle." "Wes," he said, gripping her hand briefly, his touch warm. "Wesley Thorne." There was something about him calm, self-assured, but not in a cocky way. She couldn't quite place it, but he didn't seem like someone who belonged to the crowd of perfectly polished hotel guests. There was something grounded about him. "So, Brielle," he said, leaning slightly toward her, "what brings you to the Westmont Grand?" She glanced down at her wine. "A bad job interview and a worse decision to spend my last $20 on a glass of wine in a hotel I can't afford." Wes's brows lifted. "That's bold, or stupid," she muttered. "I'd go with bold," he said, and something about the way he looked at her made her chest tighten. "What kind of job?" "Editorial assistant. I've been freelancing for a few years, but I want something stable." "Turns out that's harder to find than I thought." He studied her for a second. "You're a writer?" "Yes, well, trying to be one that gets paid." Wes swirled his drink lightly. "Do you believe in timing?" She blinked. "What, like fate, more like, right place, right time?" "Meeting the right person." "Are you saying I needed to bomb that interview so I could sit at this bar and talk to a strange man in an expensive suit?" He leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "I'm saying it's possible." Brielle's breath caught. His tone wasn't flirtatious, it was sincere. "And that made it worse or better?" She couldn't decide. She laughed, trying to shake the tension. "That's poetic for a guy drinking whiskey alone," he grinned. "What can I say? I have my moments." They talked for a while. About books, about cities they'd lived in, about the weirdest thing they'd ever ordered at a restaurant. She forgot about the failed interview, the aching feet, even the overpriced wine. She forgot everything except how easy it was to be next to him. When she finally glanced at the time, it was nearly midnight. "I should go," she said, reluctant. Wes stood with her. "Let me walk you out." She hesitated. "I took the bus in. I'm just staying at a cheap place a few blocks down. Then I'll walk you there." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because I'd regret it if I didn't." It was the way he said it, without hesitation, with that quiet confidence again. She nodded. They walked under the city lights, the air crisp but not cold. He didn't crowd her, didn't try anything. Just walked beside her like they'd done it 100 times. When they reached the small, aging hotel she was crashing at, she turned to him. "Thank you for tonight. I needed something different." He dipped his head slightly. "So did I." There was a pause. "I don't know if I'll see you again," she said, trying to hide the disappointment in her voice. "You will," he said simply. "I'll find you." She laughed. "You don't even have my number." "I don't need it." She stared at him for a beat, then stepped back. "Good night, Wes." "Good night, Brielle." She disappeared through the door, heart pounding. She didn't know that the man she'd just shared an hour of her life with was worth more than most of the people in that gleaming hotel combined. She didn't know that Wesley Thorne, billionaire CEO of Thorne Enterprises, had just fallen for the girl at the bar who thought $20 was a luxury. and she had no idea, none at all, that this was only the beginning. The rain came without warning 3 nights later, drenching the streets in a silvery gleam as Brielle pushed through the wind with a paper bag clutched to her chest. The old umbrella she'd bought from a corner store had flipped inside out 2 blocks ago, and now it hung uselessly from her wrist like a dead bird. She reached the apartment. She was house-sitting a friend of a friend gone abroad for a month, and fumbled with the keys, her fingers numb from the cold. Inside, she set the groceries down and peeled off her soaked coat, dropping it onto the floor with a soft thud. The apartment smelled faintly of sandalwood and old books, oddly comforting in its clutter. She hadn't seen Wes since the night at the Westmont Grand. No calls, no chance encounters. It wasn't as if they'd exchanged information, but still, part of her had expected, hoped for something. She made tea, curled up on the second-hand couch, and opened her laptop. Job listings. Most wanted 5 years of experience and a portfolio filled with glossy magazine names she didn't have. She clicked out of the tab and opened her drafts folder instead. The short story she'd been working on blinked back at her unfinished, like so many things lately. There was a knock at the door. She froze. No one knew she was staying here, not really. She moved to the door slowly, her mug still in hand, and looked through the peephole. Wes stood on the other side. She opened it, stunned. He wasn't in a suit this time. A dark jacket clung to his shoulders, rain glistening in his hair. His eyes met hers like no time had passed. "You found me," she whispered. "I said I would." She stepped aside wordlessly, letting him in. He shook off the rain, quietly surveying the small apartment. No judgment, just curiosity. "How?" she finally asked. "I remembered you said you were staying a few blocks from the Westmont." "I asked around. You asked around?" "I may have given a front desk clerk a very generous tip to check the visitor logs," he said, glancing at her. "It wasn't easy," she blinked. "That's mildly concerning." His lips twitched. "I'll take mildly." She laughed despite herself, motioning him toward the couch. "Tea. Only if you promise not to poison me. I make no promises." They sat, the silence between them thick but not uncomfortable. He looked around again, taking in the mismatched furniture, the stack of notebooks on the coffee table, the chipped mug in her hand. "This place suits you," he said. "It's not mine. But it still does." She studied him. "Why are you here?" "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you," he said without hesitation. "And I didn't want to wonder for the rest of my life if you were just a one-night conversation at a bar." She swallowed. "That's honest." He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. "I don't usually do this. Track down women you meet at fancy hotels, chase something real." She paused. "Is this real?" "It could be." Brielle set her mug down. "You don't even know me." "I know you're not afraid to speak your mind. You're quick but kind. You look people in the eye when they talk, and you didn't flinch when I told you I believe in timing." She looked down, suddenly unsure what to do with her hands. "Still doesn't mean you know me." "Then let me." She glanced sideways at him. "You're not married, are you?" "No secret fiancé, no dramatic reason this is a terrible idea?" "No," he said. "But I do have a habit of overworking and a tendency to forget to eat when I'm focused. I'm not great at small talk and I hate social media. I also own a company that eats up most of my life." She narrowed her eyes. "What kind of company?" He hesitated. "Tech, software mostly." "That explains the tailored jacket and the hotel. You're not going to ask how much I'm worth?" "I don't care." That made him pause. "Most people would." "I'm not most people, no," he said quietly. "You're not." The rain picked up outside, tapping against the windows in steady rhythm. She stood abruptly and went to the kitchen, returning with a second mug of tea. She handed it to him, their fingers brushing. He didn't move away, neither did she. "You're serious about this?" she asked. "I wouldn't be sitting here if I wasn't." She studied him a moment longer, then sank back into the couch. Okay, I'll let you get to know me." He raised the mug, "to not being just a one-night conversation." She clinked hers against his. "To finding out what this is." The thunder rolled through the city like a distant drumbeat, but inside the apartment, everything felt still. Neither of them said it aloud, but they both knew something had already shifted. Brielle stood frozen in the elevator, staring at the polished brass doors as they slid shut behind her. The private car was silent, the kind of silence that felt padded by wealth and power, broken only by the quiet hum of movement as it ascended. Wes stood beside her, hands in his coat pockets, his expression unreadable. "I didn't expect this to be in a skyscraper," she said finally, her voice low. "It's temporary," he replied, glancing at her without turning his head. "My place in Tribeca's being renovated." She pressed her lips together. "This is temporary." The elevator chimed softly and the doors opened to a private foyer. A fingerprint scanner blinked blue, then green as Wes pressed his thumb to it. The doors beyond clicked open. Inside, the penthouse stretched out like something from a film scene. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space, offering a panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline. The sky was still gray from the earlier storm, soft reflections of clouds swimming in the glass. The living area was expansive, all clean lines and sleek textures: walnut, steel, and soft leather. A fire glowed behind glass in the modern hearth, casting gentle light against the stone wall. Brielle stepped in slowly, her damp boots squeaking faintly on the hardwood. "You don't have to look so surprised," Wes said, slipping off his coat. "I told you I run a company." "You said you run a company," she muttered. "You didn't mention it was an empire." He moved past her and crossed to the open kitchen, where he poured 2 glasses of something amber from a crystal decanter. She didn't move to take hers, just stared at the sculpture suspended from the ceiling, an abstract tangle of brushed metal and glass that looked like it belonged in a museum. "I don't show this place to many people," he said, setting 1 glass on the marble island. "Honestly, I don't bring anyone here." "Why me?" she asked, finally facing him. Wes leaned against the counter, his gaze steady. "Because I trust you." She gave a short laugh. "You tracked me down through a hotel clerk. That's not exactly trust." "I don't trust easily," he admitted. "But I knew the second I let you walk away, I was going to regret it. I made a choice. That choice included letting you see the part of my life most people don't." She walked farther in, stopping in front of a bookcase built into the wall. It was filled with first editions and thick, leather-bound volumes. "You read all of these?" "Most," he said. "Some were my father's. He was obsessed with collecting things he never actually touched." She turned her head slightly. "Is he still around?" "No," Wes said, his tone flat. "He passed 2 years ago." She didn't press. Instead, her eyes landed on a small frame tucked between books. It held a photo of 2 boys, one clearly Wes, standing beside a man in a dark overcoat at what looked like a shipyard. "You have a brother," he said. "Jordan died when I was 23. Brielle looked at him, startled. "I'm sorry." He nodded once, then picked up her untouched drink and handed it to her. "You don't have to tiptoe. If this is going to be anything real, you should know who I am. Not just the version I show at gala dinners and investor meetings." She took the glass, her fingers brushing his. "Then I want to know all of it." Wes watched her for a moment, then led her to the couch. They sat, the skyline behind them glowing faintly as the sun began to dip behind the buildings. "After Jordan died, I threw myself into work. I didn't want to feel anything. I built the company from a garage I shared with 2 friends I've since bought out. I lost relationships, let friendships die. I stopped attending holidays. It worked for a while, the silence made it easier. And now," she asked, "now I can't stop wondering what I gave up just to prove I could survive." Brielle sipped her drink, letting the warmth bloom in her chest. "My father left when I was 9. My mom was always working, and I started writing just to feel like I had a voice somewhere. I've been chasing that feeling ever since." Wes looked at her. "You still feel like you're chasing it? Every day?" There was a pause, not uncomfortable but full. "I want to offer you something," he said. She raised a brow. "That sounds ominous." "I'm serious," Wes said. "There's a position opening at one of my companies, editorial development for a digital publishing branch I acquired last year. The team's good, but they need someone with creative instincts, not just corporate polish. I think you'd be perfect. She stared at him. You're offering me a job, I'm offering you a chance. You can interview with the team. No special treatment. You'd earn it like anyone else. She set her glass down carefully. This isn't because you feel sorry for me, Wes shook his head. This is because I believe in you. I saw it the night we met. You're smart, you're hungry, and you're not afraid to be honest. That's rare. Brielle stood, walking to the window. The city glittered below, alive and indifferent. This changes everything, she said. It could, but only if you want it to. She turned. What if I say no, then I'll keep seeing you anyway. And I'll keep believing in you whether you take the job or not. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. You're a lot to take in, Wes. So are you. They stood there a moment longer, the room quiet except for the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. When he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. She let their fingers entwine, slow and certain, and for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt like they were running. The room swelled with music, a string quartet tucked discreetly in the corner of the ballroom playing something sweeping and slow. Gilded chandeliers bathed the guests in a soft, golden hue. Brielle stood at the top of the grand staircase, heart racing beneath the midnight blue gown she hadn't picked for herself. Wes had sent it that afternoon. No note, no explanation, just a sleek box with her name on it and a driver waiting outside her apartment. She hadn't intended to go. She'd stared at the dress for nearly an hour. But something in her refused to stay behind. She descended, trying not to trip on the hem or think about the fact that every person in this room looked like they'd been born into elegance. A waiter passed, and she caught a flute of champagne, mostly to have something to hold. Brielle. She turned. Wes was there, dressed in a perfectly cut tuxedo with a black bow tie, his expression controlled but his eyes unmistakably drawn to her. The way they scanned her face, not the dress, not the heels, just her, made her stomach tighten. You came, he said. I almost didn't. What changed your mind? I realized I wasn't afraid of the people here. I was afraid of what it would mean if I belonged. He stepped closer. And do you? I don't know yet, she said, but I'd like to find out. Wes lifted his hand, palm open. Then let me show you. They crossed the ballroom, past murmured greetings and curious glances. Brielle didn't miss the way some guests looked at her as if they were trying to place her name, her family, her net worth. But no one asked. No one dared with Wes beside her. He led her out onto a terrace, the city stretching behind them in glittering silence. The glass railing reflected the light from inside, turning the night into something surreal. You're hosting this event, she said, turning to him, and yet you're out here. I was waiting for you. She glanced back toward the crowd. They're watching. They always watch, he replied. But I only see you. She didn't respond, not with words. She stepped forward, her hands on his lapels, and kissed him slow and certain. He responded without hesitation, his arms sliding around her waist, holding her like he'd waited a lifetime. When they pulled apart, her voice was quiet. I got the job, his brows lifted. You did. The team called this morning. I start Monday, Wes exhaled softly. Congratulations. I didn't want to take it because of you, she said. I wanted to take it because I earned it. You did, he said. You always were going to, she looked up at him. I need you to know something, anything. I don't care about the penthouse, or the tailored suits, or the events with people who wear names I can't pronounce. I know, you say that, but I need to say it anyway. I want you because of who you are when you're not trying to be anyone. His expression shifted, something unguarded pushing through. Then you're the only one who ever has. She brushed her fingers along the edge of his jaw. I don't want to be a part of your world if it means losing myself. Then we'll build a new one, Wes said, together. The door behind them opened. A woman in a shimmering dress stuck her head out. Wes, they're ready for your speech, he nodded once. I'll be there. She vanished. Wes turned back to Brielle. Come with me, to make a speech, to stand beside me while I do, she hesitated. You don't have to say anything, he added, just be there. She slid her hand into his. All right. Inside, the crowd quieted as Wes approached the front. He didn't hold a card. He didn't need one. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice clear and calm. "We're here to celebrate growth, partnerships, and progress. But I've learned something recently: progress means nothing if you can't share it with someone who sees you when no one else is looking." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I've spent years building companies, chasing goals, and filling rooms like this one. But tonight, I want to acknowledge something more important than any merger or milestone." He looked to Brielle, his gaze steady. "I met someone who reminded me that honesty matters more than image, that courage doesn't always come with a polished resume or a family name. Sometimes it comes with a refusal to give up." Brielle's throat tightened. She didn't arrive in this world the way most of us did, but she belongs here, not because of what she wears or what she earns, but because of who she is. The silence was absolute. Wes stepped down, offering his hand again. "I meant it when I said I was falling for you. I just didn't realize how far I'd already fallen." Brielle took his hand, the moment folding around them like soft light. Later, when the music resumed and the crowd drifted into conversation again, he led her to a quieter wing of the building. A private room with velvet chairs and a view of the skyline. On the table was a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a single sheet of paper. Elise, her name was on it. She looked up sharply. "What is this?" "A writing studio," he said. "You mentioned once that you could never think clearly in small apartments. It's yours, no strings." She stared at him. "You can't just—" "I can," he said, "but I won't. Not unless you want it." She folded the paper slowly. "You really believe in me?" "I always did." She stepped to him, wrapping her arms around his waist, burying her face in his chest. "Then I guess I believe in us." The city continued outside, but in that moment, on that quiet floor far above the noise, they stood still, two people from different worlds, building something neither had dared hope for. And this time, she didn't walk away. Wes curled his fingers around the steering wheel as the iron gates of the Thorne estate opened slowly. The car glided up the long private drive lined with dormant cherry blossom trees, their branches bare under the early March sky. Brielle sat beside him, one hand resting on her lap, the other tracing the line of a folded note she hadn't let go since they left the city. He glanced at her. "You sure you want to do this? If I wait any longer, I'll start imagining reasons not to." The house came into view, an old stone manor that had been in Wes's family for 3 generations. Not the modern, sharp-edged buildings he typically favored. This one had history and ghosts. Wes parked. Brielle stepped out, her heels crunching softly on the gravel. She took in the ivy-covered facade, the high arched windows, the quiet. "I wasn't expecting something that looked like it belonged in the English countryside." "My mother loved it that way," he said. "She never wanted us to forget where we came from. And does it work?" "Sometimes too well." They walked up together. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something older. A housekeeper greeted them politely before disappearing down a hallway. Wes led Brielle through the foyer, pausing near a tall portrait of a woman in emerald green. "She looks like you," Brielle said, studying the woman's sharp cheekbones and steady gaze. She was sharper than she looked. That painting was commissioned on her 40th birthday. She hated it. Said it made her look too forgiving. Brielle smiled softly. "Did she ever meet your brother's fiancée?" Wes's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Once. It didn't go well." They moved to the sunroom, where the late afternoon light spilled across a wide view of the hills behind the house. On a small table beside the window sat a black lacquered box with a brass clasp. Wes didn't touch it. "I haven't opened that since the funeral," he said. "It's Jordan's." Brielle approached slowly. "Are you ready?" He hesitated. Then he nodded. She opened the clasp, revealing a neat stack of letters, a small sketchbook, and a silver lighter engraved with initials. Wes reached in and picked up the sketchbook. Flipping it open, he found pages of designs, boats mostly, with notes in the margins. One sketch showed a long, narrow yacht with his brother's handwriting labeling it. For Wes, when he finally slows down, he blinked once hard. He never got to show me this, he said. Brielle stood close beside him. But he wanted you to have it. He knew you'd come here one day. Wes closed the book gently. I spent so long trying to outrun the past, I didn't realize it was the only place I'd find him. He turned to her. Thank you for coming with me. You didn't ask me to, she said. That's why it meant more. They returned to the city later that evening. As they stepped off the elevator into Wes's apartment, Brielle set the letter she'd been holding all day on the kitchen counter. He picked it up, recognizing his own handwriting across the front. I wrote it the night I found you again, he said. Didn't think you ever saw me slip it into your bag. I didn't. I found it last week when I was cleaning. I waited to open it. He unfolded the page, read it silently, then handed it to her. She read aloud. If I ever get the chance, I want to love you without hesitation, without hiding, without the weight of everything I've been. I don't need time to figure it out. I just need you to stay. Her voice caught at the last word. He stepped forward. I meant every line. She laid the note down. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. He kissed her without another word, pulling her close, grounding himself in the warmth of her skin, and the way her hands slid over his back like she already knew every part of him. Weeks passed. Brielle settled into her new role, leading a small creative team with fresh confidence. She worked late some nights, Wes bringing her dinner instead of calling, sometimes just sitting beside her while she edited or scribbled in her notebook. Other nights she came home to find him on the balcony barefoot, reading one of his brother's journals, a glass of wine untouched at his side. They didn't try to make each other whole. They just stayed present, steady. One Saturday morning, Wes woke her with a tray of croissants and coffee. She blinked sleepily, smiling without opening her eyes. This is suspicious, she murmured into the pillow. I'm a suspicious man. She sat up, brushing hair from her face. What's the occasion? He reached into his robe pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I was going to wait until tonight, she froze. I realized, he said, that I don't want to build anything unless you're part of it. Not a company, not a house, not a life. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold band, its surface etched with a pattern that looked like waves. It's not flashy, he said, but it's us. Brielle stared at him, barely breathing. You're serious? I've never been more. She took the ring, held it between her fingers, and looked at him like he was the only truth in the world. Yes, she said softly. Yes, Wes. They married in the spring, in a quiet ceremony on a hill above the Thorne estate, surrounded by only a few close friends and the stubborn cherry blossom trees that had finally bloomed. Brielle wore a gown with pockets. Wes wore the same cufflinks Jordan had left him. There were no grand speeches, no headlines. Just two people who had chosen each other again and again without needing an audience. That summer, she published her first short story collection. On the dedication page were 4 words for Wes, my beginning. And every morning after, he kissed her like she was still the girl from the bar, and he was still the man who knew the moment he saw her that timing wasn't fate, it was choice, and he'd choose her always.